Please welcome to the stage Chief Economist of Bloomberg Economics, Tom Orlik.
So, what did everyone think of that Boris Johnson speech last night? Pretty hilarious, right? It's that quality of leadership which is going to have me and the other British people chuckling through the looming recession and the multi-decade drag on growth from Brexit. Hilarious. So, on to my presentation, which I've titled High Rates, Broken China, and the Return of History. It's a lot, right? But, it's Thursday afternoon. I figure go big or go home. Or perhaps go big and then go home. So, in the early 1980s, Paul Volcker, the Fed chair, slayed the dragon of inflation. And in the period since then, and especially in the period since the global financial crisis, inflation has stayed low, and that has enabled central banks to keep borrowing costs low. That has now changed. In the last 2 years, inflation has rocketed up, and as you can see in this chart, that has pushed global central banks, the Fed, the ECB, and the Bank of England onto an accelerated tightening trajectory. That shift from a world of cheap money to a world of expensive money is going to have profound impacts on the global economy. In a world of cheap money, the G7 can pile on public debt and service it at very low cost. In a world of expensive money, as you can see in this chart, debt in G7 economies has moved onto an unsustainable trajectory. In a world of cheap money, emerging and frontier economies can borrow to pay for crucial imports of food and fuel and service those debts at low cost. In a world of expensive money, they can't. Some, like Sri Lanka, have already defaulted, and it's only action by the International Monetary Fund everywhere from Pakistan to Argentina which is preventing a larger wave of emerging market defaults and market meltdowns. In a world of cheap money, Sam Bankman-Fried is a genius, and Mark Zuckerberg is building the metaverse. In a world of expensive money, Sam Bankman-Fried is bankrupt, and Mark Zuckerberg is saying goodbye to thousands of his employees. Put simply, in a world of cheap money, everything is easy. In a world of expensive money, everything is difficult, and we are now in a world of expensive money. There's another important transition which is taking place in the global economy. A shift from supercharged China growth to slumping China growth. Now, I think we have to acknowledge that on China, the last few days have brought some unexpected good news. COVID-0 restrictions are being eased a little sooner than expected. Property stimulus is a little more generous than expected. And US-China relations have gone from deep freeze to warm handshakes. The immediate outlook for China growth, the outlook for 2023, is a little brighter than it appeared a few days ago. Even so, when we look to the medium term, China faces some enormous challenges. Demographics have turned from a driver to a drag, with the working age population shrinking. Overcapacity in industry and in real estate, and the debt which has been taken on to pay for the build-out of that overcapacity will be a drag on growth, not just in 2022 and 2023, but for years ahead. And Xi Jinping's decision to stay on as General Secretary of the Communist Party and China's paramount leader for a precedent-breaking third term, and to stack the Standing Committee with his allies, raises new questions about China's governance. Will the quality of decision-making on China's economy be as good in the years ahead as it was in the years past? Put these problems together, and a Chinese economy which for much of the last 4 decades recorded annual growth of around 10%, will in the 2020s be lucky if it records average annual growth of 4%. By the end of this decade, some economists say China will be growing at just a 2% pace. For the rest of the world, the difference between a China growing at 10% a year and a China growing at 2% a year is profound. Why has Singapore outperformed in recent years? Well, one reason for that, of course, is the smarts and ingenuity of the Singaporean government and the Singaporean people, qualities that we've seen on abundant display once again at this year's New Economy Forum. But another reason is because Singapore, like other Asian economies, has been swept along by the rising tide of Chinese demand. And as China's growth now decelerates, that driver is going to turn into a drag. As you can see in this chart, every 1 percentage point deceleration in China's growth subtracts 0.5% from Singapore's growth. And the same is true of Indonesia, the same is true of Thailand, the same is true of Malaysia and the Philippines. For the commodity exporters, new economies like Brazil and Chile and Peru, which have mined and drilled to extract the raw materials needed to feed China's industrial engine. The transition from rapid growth in China to substantially slower growth in China is going to mean lower commodity prices, reduced export earnings, and so slower growth. In the decades just past, China has been a driver of rapid global growth. In the decade to come, that driver is set to turn into a drag. On geopolitics, in 1989, the political scientist Francis Fukuyama declared the end of history with the final triumph of democracy and free markets over state-controlled economies and authoritarian political systems. As the Berlin Wall fell and the Soviet Union collapsed, Fukuyama looked prescient. But with the benefit of 3 decades of hindsight, we can now see that his call was, well, let's just call it premature. In the decades since the fall of the Soviet Union, the share of global GDP coming from the free market democratic West hasn't risen, it's fallen. And the share coming from Asia has increased substantially. Now, clearly the relationship is not one for one. There are vibrant democracies and free markets here in Asia. But in broad strokes, the transition, the rebalancing of global GDP from the West to the East is also the fall of free market democracies and the rise of some authoritarian and state-dominated systems. And that return of history, too, has profound consequences for the global economy. What did Vladimir Putin say to Xi Jinping when the two men stood together in January, just days before the Russian tanks rolled across the border into Ukraine? Perhaps we'll never know, but I think it's a reasonable bet that it's the decline of the free market democratic West that was one of the factors which emboldened Putin. Now, the consequence of Russia's invasion of Ukraine primarily are a tragedy for the Ukrainian people, but they also send shockwaves across the global economy. Look at the outlook for Europe's GDP with supplies of Russian gas cut off. If winter is warm and gas reserves hold up, Europe can continue to grow. If winter is cold and Europe runs out of gas, Europe faces a recession as deep as that which followed the global financial crisis. On US-China relations, the temperature is a few degrees warmer following Xi and Biden's meeting in Bali, but it's still pretty chilly. Trump tariffs remain in place, and the Biden administration has gone further, imposing a ban on sales of leading-edge semiconductors to China, which, if strictly enforced, threatens to turn China into a kind of Amish community, its technological development frozen in place. A world where history is over is a world of free trade between great powers, cheap goods, abundant energy, strong growth, and low inflation. A world where history has returned is a world of new barriers to trade between great powers, snarled supply chains, scarce energy, fragile growth, and volatile prices. Now, I don't want to leave you with too gloomy a picture, although I'm not sure I've succeeded in that objective. There are things that can go right as well as go wrong. Perhaps China will exit COVID-0 more quickly than expected. Perhaps US inflation will come down more quickly than expected, and the Federal Reserve will be able to get away with a lower terminal rate. Perhaps global condemnation of Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine will bring that conflict to an end sooner than expected. There are risks to the upside as well as to the downside. The big picture I want to leave you with, though, is that three pillars which supported decades of rising global prosperity, low global borrowing costs, supercharged demand from China, and limited geopolitical frictions, those pillars have all been kicked away. As a consequence, seldom has the outlook for the global economy been more fraught with uncertainty and peril, and seldom has the need for the solutions which are being discussed at this year's New Economy Forum been more urgent. Thank you.